Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. May I welcome you to this second day of the British Amateur Television Club Conference CAT 18. I'm going to give the first lecture, which is somewhat different from the usual ones. This is about life and times in outside broadcasts. A little bit about vehicles, a little bit about what it's like to work in outside broadcasts, and a little bit about a project to restore a very old OB van. So this is where it all started. That's the bed television scanner at the Derby in whenever it was. Yes, technical detail. Now, apart from being a remarkable first and all that, it's thought that is where the term scanner comes from. Inside the caravan there is the mechanical apparatus, the spinning discs, which of course is fixed and solid. But the clever bit is the mirror on the door. And as the horses ran past, they turned the mirror to follow the action. Cunning, eh? Moving on a little bit, this is the first electronic scanner, built by the BBC in 1937 and called MCR1, Mobile Control Room 1. The equipment in it was basically the same as that which was installed in Alexandra Palace, and it took up most of the vehicle. This is the scanner van. Associated with it was a transmitter van and a generator van. If you look carefully, you can just see the 3 camera cables coming out of the junction box there. There were just 3 picture monitors installed at the front and no real production layout. The next generation, this is just post-war, was built by Pi, MCR3. And things had moved on quite a lot during the war. There was a lot of technological advances, and we now have a proper layout inside the vehicle where there are the 3 camera monitors and a transmission monitor. The production crew sat across the vehicle, and there's the production secretary, the director, the sound man, and off to this side, which we can't see, is the engineering manager. Sat in front are 4 vision control engineers, 1 for each camera, and a supervisor to ensure that the 3 cameras are more or less the same in appearance so that you can believe they're at the same place. We've moved on another decade now, and this is the last generation of monochrome vehicles that the BBC made. It's MCR21. You have a new message. Just good timing, what? So, it's still a transverse layout. Engineering manager, sound man, vision mixer or producer, and production secretary. Sat down the front there are the 4 vision engineers with the 4 monitors, 1 for each camera. There's the transmission monitor, which is a larger 17-inch side, and 2 preview monitors to either side. So there's much more flexibility now than there was in that first generation of post-war scanners. This is a picture of the outside in the traditional BBC green. And it's one of 10. This last generation, the BBC made 10. 1 for Cardiff, 1 for Belfast, 1 for Glasgow, and 3 for London. We've moved on a little bit further now, not quite another decade. This is the early 70s, and it's the 2nd generation of colour vehicles. A Type 2. It has got a number. They discontinued the MCR numbers and started with CMCRs, colour mobile control rooms. This is actually the vehicle owned and restored by Steve Harris. So it's actually on the road in restored condition and has cameras. But what I want to point out to you while we've got the picture up is the ventilation there. There are 5 great fans in the side to suck the heat out from the equipment. This was always a problem. And I want to return to the cooling aspect on later pictures. Around the skirt of the vehicle are various lockers that contain exciting things like batteries and air conditioning units and automatic voltage regulators and all the paraphernalia that's associated with it. Now, the principal difference between this and the previous generation is that they've turned the layout around so that people, instead of sitting across the vehicle, sit the length of the vehicle. It's a longitudinal format. And in this next slide here, we've slipped on another decade now, or perhaps a decade and a bit. This is early 90s. And it's a Type 8 mobile control room. Virtually the last one that the BBC produced, this design, and it's very complex. You can see that the seating is longitudinal. So at the back, we've got the sound control room with the sound desk there, the jack fields there. The back of this square panel is an interesting panel. It's one of the useful bits that the BBC introduced. It's a pin matrix, and it's used to distribute sound and talkback to various monitoring places. You can imagine the situation. There's a particular camera in the studio and he wants to hear a different program sound in his ear and perhaps different production talkback from somebody out on the pitch. So you put the pins in and you can route the sound, the talkbacks and program sound to the appropriate destinations. The production control room here with many more monitors. Experience has shown us that there's never enough. If you had 100, it wasn't enough. If you had 200, it wasn't enough. We'll see more of that later. Here's the production desk with the same layout. Production secretary, vision mixer or director, and engineering manager. The sound man, of course, has moved into his own area at the back. This vehicle is the one that has expanding sides. The whole monitor stack there, if you think about a longitudinal arrangement, you've only got 8 feet. So by the time you've got a couple of feet to sit in, a couple of feet for the desk, the monitors are 18 inches deep. They're almost here, and you like this to try and see them. So in order to improve the viewing angle, the whole monitor stack slid out of the vehicle by a foot. And in order to get more room for the production crew, the wall on this side slid out by about 2 feet. So you've now got quite a significantly large production control room in the middle. There was a later development of this in order to create even more room for the production people. That wall was modified to have doors which swung out like that, and new walls could be carried from the camera van and put on a new bit of roof, and it was all very heavy and awkward to put up. We called it the West Wing. And it did create more room inside, but you can imagine there's 2 of you struggling with this great roof panel to try and get it in the right place, and it's dark and it's raining and you want to go home. Anyway, this is the vision control area. Greatly expanded as well. Engineering manager, positions for the vision engineers. The vision engineers in the first vehicle we saw did 1 camera each. The next one, that one, the vision engineers did 2 cameras. And in this one, the vision engineers did 4 cameras. And so you've got a operational control panel with the joystick on it. So that's iris, and that's lift, and that's pressing it down gives you a preview picture on your monitor. And 4 worked passably well because you could sort of do that. Later economies, some vehicles had 5, which was tricky because you couldn't do that, and it didn't work as well. So you could do 4 reasonably well or 5 badly. It was all right as long as the light was constant, but if you were out and the sun was going in and out, it was a real pain. Anyway, back to the Type 8. One of the design aspects of the Type 8 was to try and integrate things into the vehicles, so you needed less auxiliary vehicles. And it has at the front here this general purpose area, and you could put a couple of VT machines in there and record the program locally, or you could put the outgoing radio link in there with perhaps a dish on a roof or a nearby building, or you could put some more vision engineers in there with more operational control panels, and then you could do, instead of doing 12, you could do 20, which was about as far as you could go in that vehicle, but 20 cameras is quite a lot. Things expanded over the years, and this is the latest end-of-the-line vehicle for what was BBC Outside Broadcasts, and later when the BBC in their wisdom sold it off to SIS. So SIS built this as the fleet's flagship. It's a triple expander. The whole side on this side comes out, and there's a double expansion on that side. I haven't got a layout plan for it, but I have got a layout plan here for its predecessor, which was also a triple expander, but not as big a triple expander as that one. So it has almost everything built in to accommodate large and complex programs. So at the back, you've got the sound end, and instead of having just one sound mixer, you've got 2 sound mixers independently working from each other in independent cubicles. In the middle, you've got production again, and the production area is vast. You could have a party in there, or and again, there are 2 vision mixers that can operate independently. In this section is the vision control, much like the Type 8, but with an extra desk, 4 cameras each. And in the corner is a matrix. The matrix in this vehicle always worried me. Everything went through it, and if it stopped, it was a real pity. It lived in the corner in its own air-conditioned cubicle. At the other side of the vehicle, behind vision, was the VT area. 2 cubicles, and the idea is that the VT empire has now expanded almost beyond belief. Everything is recorded so that you can have instant slow-mos of this and that, that VT area was a significant part of the vehicle. What else can I say about this? There's the tailboard with the connections in and out to the outside world. There's masts, there's a mast at the front. Its worst feature was the chairs. Now, you think chairs, so what? But imagine all those people in there, they all need to sit on a chair, and when the sides come in, there's no room for these chairs. So every D-rig and rig, you have to take the chairs out an auxiliary vehicle and carry them in and carry them out again. And all the bits of you can imagine it's like a jigsaw, that going together. All the bits of floors have to come up in the right order and be packed away, and it sort of fits in. It's like the Temple of Doom with the walls coming in. But it was a grand vehicle and tremendously powerful. I'm going to return later to the two vision mixers which are in it. We'll press on about working in outside broadcast. Now, it was a very different sort of job. You never knew where you were going to be or how long or what you were going to do. We were on an irregular hours 2 contract when we were staff. That meant that there were no predictability to your working life. The phones could ring and a voice would say, "Can you go to so-and-so now?" So you go to so-and-so. Or you might do 6, 7, 8 weeks solid in the summer and then get a whole month off in the winter. It's very odd. In a way, it was very useful because when I retired, it was just like the winter and you didn't go to work. So there was no real shock in stopping working, but that's another issue. Now, one of the biggest jobs we did in outside broadcast was Wimbledon. Wimbledon was enormous. So this is the OB parking area behind, tucked away behind the buildings. And that vehicle there is the vehicle on that sheet which is circulating. It was a BBC vehicle called the CMCCR, that's Colour Mobile Central Control Room, and its job was to combine the outputs of other vehicles into one. Because as you can well imagine, there are a lot of cameras at Wimbledon, and it was organised differently from a conventional football match or something, in so much as each court had its own independent mixing arrangements and produced court 1, centre court, court 14 or whatever as a programme stream. These programme streams went to this room which was called Oscar, On-Site Central Apparatus Area, and it was a sort of exchange area for all these programmes. So all the courts come into it and are then distributed out. Because it wasn't just the BBC at Wimbledon, the rest of the world were there. There was ABC and New Zealand and China, and they all wanted a programme which featured their players. So whilst we might have been terribly interested in, say, court 14, the Chinese might have wanted some other outside court or centre court because their players were on it. And this central control area did all the distribution to the other broadcasters, as well as the BBC. Just returning back to this room and there. So that's the courtyard where the vans are, and that's only a part of it. There is below there 2 layers, 2 basement layers. So there are 2 sub layers with more control rooms, studios, and the apparatus area there is one of the basement rooms, as is this. This is the equipment for some of the outside courts which have their own mixers in different rooms in the basement area. It's a warren, Wimbledon, when you actually start exploring it. That's the tailboard on the CMCCR. Virtually every BNC and way in and out of the vehicle is used. And there are 6 63 amp power cables there. 6 63 amp power cables. One of my tasks every morning when I arrived was to go round and feel them to see if they were getting hot. We never turned it off. For 3 weeks the thing ran solid. And you would go round and yes, 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 worry, And you'd go back an hour later and see how it was doing, because you couldn't turn the thing off. There'd be an awful lot of shouting. Right. That's the studio. What the presenter sees, what Sue Barker will be sat there, and this is her view. And I photographed it every year so that I could refer back to those photographs when there was the argument about how it was last year. And yes? Now, moving on to another programme which we did every year, this is the marathon. So, there are the motorbikes at the start with the transmitter on the back, and the driver and the cameraman sat on it on pillion, and he would either look forwards or perhaps he was really lucky and sat the other way round and looked backwards. Yes. And they had a transmitter on them which went up to a circling aircraft. And there was also 2 helicopters involved which gave above shots, and their outputs went up to this aircraft as well. And that signal was then relayed to the top of East Tower. East Tower is one of the buildings at Television Centre.
What frequencies have they used to?
There's the aerial.
Yeah, 2.2 gigs. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I didn't worry about that over much.
No, I was a bit concerned, Brian, there's a dish in your presentation.
Oh, there's more dishes than you could shake a stick at up there. But it really is held together with string or sash cord. We used a lot of sash cord. I can imagine the sash cord manufacturers thought, who's this outfit in West Acton that keeps buying miles of sash cord? That's the view down from the East Tower onto the Donut Television Centre. I was in one of these spurs here, and this is me. My job on a regular basis was to synchronise and correct these incoming signals from the motorbikes. If you imagine the motorbike and the helicopters, there's no local control of the exposure or colour, it's all a bit potluck, and my job was to try and fix it. And then I passed the signals on to presentation, and then they would mix them into the programme as they wished. Golf. We did a lot of golf. Golf was very complex, not perhaps quite as complex as Wimbledon, but it happened very quickly. The vehicles would arrive perhaps Monday lunchtime, and you were expected to be working by Wednesday afternoon. Sometimes you were and sometimes you weren't. But it's very complex. It's hard to show the extent of the vehicles. But that's the main trackway down the middle, and it goes for some distance, and it's 2 deep either side. And again, that's the me at the tailboard. You can see all these BNCs here. There's never enough. And behind me are the triax connections, and underneath this lot are multi-core cables which we called Mark 7s, and these were fairly chunky cables which had 7 individual vids in them and a number of audio circuits, and they were all used as well. And that's the monitor stack for the inside of the CMCCR. And so there's all the fixed tellies. Up the side there are 2 additional piles stacked up in the hope they don't fall over of additional monitors. There's another little batch of additional monitors there, and there's 1 or 2 sort of just on boxes in front of the vision mixer, and there was never enough. Production secretary, producer, professional vision mixer, because the producer would say, I want to do this, and the vision mixer would follow the instructions. Because there was a lot of buttons on that mixer. It had 48 inputs. And that wasn't enough. So on some of the buttons, you would have a pre-selector to give you another 10 or dozen. So you'd cut. The second vision mixer here, her job was to coordinate some of the graphics. So she would take a screen grab of a player in a particularly attractive pose and store it in a device called a slide file. And perhaps she would draw up 2 of these slide file pictures, stick them into the Charisma and make 2 little boxes and perhaps twirl them around as a program junction between different matches. There can be hazards on OBs. It's not all plain sailing. So here we are, the roof has flooded and the water is pouring in through the inside of the scanner. And here are the crew desperately trying to catch it. There's all sorts of panics like that. I remember one which turned out to be a conker stuck in the drain from the roof. Wrong button. But there are external hazards as well. On a golf course, they say bunkers are planned hazards. Well, here is a planned bunker that somebody drove into. Wasn't me. I'd like to point that out. Wasn't me. But that caused much amusement. Now, I'd like now to talk about my OB van, MCR21, which some of you may be familiar with or not. The plan is to restore it and put its ownership into a trust to give it ongoing future continuity when I'm not here. So this is it at a much earlier stage in its life. Oops, wrong button. There. I think that is at the Leicester Post House. Those of you with very long memories will remember us at the Leicester Post House. I think that's at Spalding. I painted it blue at the time because I fancied blue. I thought it was a nice colour. This is it when it was new in 1963. Parked outside Wembley. But apart from the Twin Towers there and that's grass. And it's not built on. And there's the scanner with 2 cameras, and that's a publicity shot. The inside view, this is what we want to get it back to with its original monochrome monitors and monochrome cameras. The sound desk, quadrant faders, the engineering manager's position with the jacks and the manual telephone exchange. Those of you who are into telephone exchanges, who knows what a doll's eye is? Yes, and there's a row of doll's eyes.
The relay just shuts an iris over like that.
Yes, to indicate which one's calling on the magneto. Yes. The 10-channel vision mixer with the faders, the cut buttons and a few wipes. And the production secretary's position. Worthy of note is that empty hole. Now these photographs were taken at Pies during construction. And again, those of you with long memories would remember the GPO regulations for the installation of their telephones. Only they could do it. And it was quite difficult to get them to install a telephone in a vehicle. So that space is awaiting the installation of a GPO telephone, and the GPO engineer would actually put the wire in from the telephone to the tailboard to the socket. Pies couldn't do it. And that persisted for quite some time, actually. The engineer's position with the engineer's control panel with the controls for the image orphan camera and the iris and lift control. And there's one of these panels on display in the hangar over there, awaiting restoration. Oh, wrong way. So, as I said, we've got the truss set up. We have a preliminary heritage lottery grant, which we can spend setting up the truss. We can't spend the grant on doing the vehicle up. We've got to spend the grant on the admin. But the idea is that that will enable us to apply for a proper grant, which we can spend on the truck. So we're hoping to make it a historical artifact. So the interior equipment will be as close as feasible to the original. We have some items of equipment, and others will have to be remade. There's much cabling to install and plans and schedules, but I do have some plans. This is a block diagram of some of the installed equipment with the connecting cables and useful things like cable numbers. I'll not pass this round because it's inconvenient, but it's over here if you want to look at it later. How are we doing for time?
We've got 5 minutes.
Yes.
Before Graham starts.
Jolly good. So, as I said, we're now a registered charity with 4 trustees. Thank you to the first dollop of lottery money has enabled that. And we're looking round for help and support, both with the financially, making equipment, wiring, all sorts of things. Part of the object is to try and pass on our skills to the next generation. I know how to make OB vans, but I'd like to pass those skills on to the future. And although this is an old van, the principles involved are much the same as any other vehicle which is built today. I'm just going to slip back to
Will that skill be passed on, Brian?
well, I hope so. Well, if I've got it.
Into a bunker.
Oh, come on, how far back is it? That's the one I want. What I wanted to point out to you was one of the hidden difficulties of OB vans, and that's controlling the interior environment. They can be very cold, they can be very hot, they can be very damp, none of which people or equipment like. So this Type 8 has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 air conditioning units. And this one is arranged so that the air in the human occupied space is drawn in through the bottom of the equipment bays and sucked up into the fans, through the cooler and out back into the human area. And that's repeated for each area and enables you to get some semblance of control. But even then, the air conditioning units are very problematic. They break down, they require fiddling, and if you recall the vehicles parked at Wimbledon, how they were in that courtyard, enclosed, and the sun is beating down, and all these vehicles, do you remember the 663 amps? There's a lot of heat there, not much comes out the vehicle in terms of signals. You get 2 or 3 times 1 milliwatt, so the efficiency is appalling. All that heat is dissipated and sort of forms a cloud of hot air. And the air conditioning units struggle, and the air conditioning engineer comes and fiddles with the gas. And then when they go off to the golf on the next programme, there's plenty of cooling, and there's now too much gas in there, and the air conditioning man has to come and let some gas out, so there's constant fiddling. So that really, I think, about wraps this up, unless there are any questions. Oh, yes.
Where is the vehicle?
It's parked in my drive at home. Well, where else would you?
Can I ask, Brian, I watch TV a little bit. I spend more time on amateur TV, of course, but I don't think the quality of outside broadcasts is anywhere near as good as it used to be. For instance, lip sync, since they've gone to digital TV, it always seems to have an integral lag, and I just feel that people are getting used to low quality picture quality, and it's not as good as it used to be. I just wondered what your view is on that.
I'd be inclined to. Well, this is a multifaceted problem.
We really haven't got time to debate it here.
I agree. There's a lot to be wished for.
Thank you, Brian.